Good morning and welcome to Amati Insights call. As we know, we do this every 2 weeks and we pick subjects where we think it's a really important theme in the market, something investors should know about, where we have uh, strong opinions, so usually based on research, and where it's in some ways reflect the portfolio positioning for our Amati Global Innovation Fund. Of course, as you can see from this disclaimer on the screen and on our website, nothing we say is a recommendation to buy a stock or a fund, so do your own research. And with that, the theme today, the topic of the Insights call today, is robotics. And Graeme, you're just back from the Robotics and Automation show in Birmingham. You get to go to all the glamorous locations. So maybe just to start, what's that event about? What is it focused on? Before we get into the detail of it.
Yeah, it's a great event. There are always a lot of participants, but it's a robotics and automation show. It's quite focused on logistics in particular. So logistics, warehouses, supply chain automation, which is an interesting area for us. Obviously, on the portfolio, we're quite exposed to that sort of niche. Around 10% of the fund, in fact, is exposed to logistics automation and areas that are related to that. The event itself was pretty upbeat, more upbeat than last year, I would say. Slightly higher attendance. People that I spoke to were a bit more optimistic about the environment, which is good. And I always find it a really useful event to go to because there are just, it's this niche, if you like, this kind of warehouse automation niche is relatively small in the UK, and you find that people move from one firm to another often, and it's a great way of getting sort of unbiased insights into how firms operate and which companies are winning and which companies aren't doing so well. So it's a great event to go to.
Yeah, it's been a brutal cycle in some ways because a lot of logistics investments happened during COVID to kind of to serve the e-commerce economy, and we were going through a bit of a hangover period after that. So it's nice to see that things are improving, although I guess we haven't seen it in company results very strongly yet. Just the outlook statements are getting a little bit more positive. So it's good to see it's confirmed on the ground.
Yeah, that's true. And I think the companies are still pretty optimistic about the long-term growth rate. It's just the short term has been affected by issues like US elections and now to some extent US tariffs.
And in terms of the long term, there are lots of solutions that the industry is offering. It's quite a confusing range of options. So, how do you think how the companies are thinking about what options to choose, what to implement in their business?
Yeah, it definitely is a complex area, and there are a lot of different solutions. Um, Maybe if I just go through a few of them, there's so you might be able to see a slide now of a cube storage. So this is called ASRS, so automated storage and retrieval. This company is actually AutoStore, which is a company we have shares in. These are very concentrated ways of storing goods of a particular size. So they have a fixed sort of tote or bin size, but very, very high density and very high throughput. So if you're a company like Puma, for example, or even a semiconductor company like Texas Instruments that has a lot of quite small goods and very high throughput, this is a great solution. There's a reasonable amount of investment upfront, but you tends to have a very quick payback. So most companies that install an AutoStore getting a payback in about between 1 and 3 years. So, but this doesn't suit everybody. It depends on the size of your existing warehouse, how many SKUs, so how many kind of individual goods you have, how far they have to travel around the warehouse, whether you have big seasonal variations. There are other alternatives to an AutoStore. This is a picture of another sort of cube storage solution that was on display at the show. This one, you can see the robots at the bottom right hand side on the floor of the warehouse, as it were. That robot can take a box and drive around the warehouse to deliver it to a packer or somebody setting up a pallet. But it can equally come back into the machine. And if you look in the middle, there's one that's sort of driving up inside the middle of the cube storage to go and pick up a box from somewhere else. This is not quite as space efficient as the AutoStore, but it offers that ability to be able to take the robot around the factory or the warehouse. The simplest and kind of cheapest alternative for somebody who has a pretty manual warehouse at the moment is to just either buy or rent some of these what are called automated mobile robots, and they can just do packing and bringing packages to the people who are doing the packing, I should say. So they're kind of a way of bringing the shelf to the person rather than the person having to walk through the warehouse to
And
the shelf.
that's what Amazon uses a lot in their warehouse, isn't it?
Amazon, yes, uses a lot of this. And increasingly, this is a sort of easy way of getting into automation and logistics. And it's also it's flexible, so you can ramp them up the number of robots during periods of high intensity. So, there are a lot of different solutions, and it really depends on what task you're trying to solve. A neat one that was on display at the show, you can see here. So for sort of very small parcel logistics operations, like a post office, effectively, these are very flexible and quite cheap to operate, but take a lot of people out of the operation. And obviously, that's what these companies are trying to do. Labor is getting more expensive. Often it's difficult to find people and reliable people. So upgrading to automation is something that makes a lot of sense.
Mm. And you want to make sure that whatever parcels you're dropping from the height into those bins, it doesn't contain anything fragile, I guess. But it's a neat solution. So how do obviously the warehouses are busy places, complex geometries. How do the kind of the brains behind this robots work in terms of the vision and sensing of their space? What's happening in technology in that area?
Yeah, there are a number of different solutions. So the sort of shelf moving robots you saw earlier, often they use LiDAR. So that's just a sort of the thing we see on a lot of self-driving cars. Just essentially it's a laser scanner that looks out in front of the vehicle, or in this case the robot, and sort of can see if there are obstacles in front of it. Some of the more advanced ones use machine vision. And in fact, we have an investment we have exposure to machine vision in a couple of our investments. One is Cognex, which is probably the leading supplier of machine vision equipment, based in the US, and another is Zebra, which is a company that does a lot of other logistics sort of efficiency optimizing equipment, but including machine vision. And in fact, if I bring up the next slide, I can show you a couple of slides from the show. So the one on the left, you've got a Zebra demonstration of using 3D machine vision equipment for scanning very high throughput conveyors of packaged goods in this case. So these are typically used for quality control, to make sure that the goods that are going through don't have any damage or haven't been manufactured incorrectly. And you get the 3D version now has got a new solution, means you just have one device that goes in on the top of the conveyor, and it gets an enormous amount of information. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see a Cognex example, which is a much smaller, much cheaper alternative, but not quite as competent, not quite as high throughput. But the advantage here is that they're very, very simple to install. And because of AI now, these equipment is very quick to learn the things that it's trying to track and assess. So in the old days, if you installed a machine vision system, there was an enormous amount of programming and testing and setting of the precise measurements for any parts or any items that had to go to be assessed. Now you just use AI and the machine vision to just put a few items down past the sensor to show it what good looks like and what bad looks like. And within an hour, with no programming, you're up and running. So it's really opening this market up to a much wider variety of customers, and bringing it down the scale in terms of the size of the business that can use them.
And how's the competition evolving? With this kind of new modalities like AI-based machine vision or all these varieties of robotics in the warehouse. Are there new entrants? Are there, new entrants from China making their presence known in the Western markets?
Definitely new entrants from China. There are a number of different players actually at the show this year that weren't at the show last year. China's a very highly automated industry anyway. The Chinese government has had a real push to increase the level of automation across manufacturing and supply chains. So in fact, the density of robots and the kind of penetration of automation in China is now materially higher than it is in the US and in the West, in Europe. But that said, larger European customers are not keen yet and not prepared to use a lot of Chinese equipment because they don't know the quality. They don't. These companies are new to the market, so there's lack of confidence in them being there. Maybe in 5 years' time, these are big investments, and typically companies are wanting to go with a solution that's proven in the market. AutoStore, for example, is by far the biggest cube storage solution in the world in terms of numbers of installations. They have 99.6% uptime, so it's a very reliable partner. And customers are understandably quite cautious about going with new or sort of new entrants like the Chinese. One thing I will say, though, the Chinese are not necessarily the Chinese companies not necessarily competing on price. A lot of them come in and try to use price as a way of getting a foot in the door, but ultimately their solutions are not really cheaper because they're building very similar equipment from very similar materials, and there's a limited amount of differentiation where you can take price out.
Interesting. So any new discoveries, any areas of innovation which are really taking off, any technological changes that you've found in this particular event?
One that was neat that I spoke to one of the integrators. So we have shares in a company called Reply, which is an Italian IT service company, specialist kind of technology company. They have a division that operates in this market, and they're always at the show and very helpful, sort of talking about things that are changing. One of the things they mentioned this year is the arrival of 2D barcodes. So these are basically things that look a lot like a QR code. And they're coming particularly to retail and to areas like beverages. So there's in the EU, there's a new wine rule that's come in so that there's more detailed labeling. In the US, there's a number of new regulations that are coming through requiring more detailed labeling on goods, Food Safety Modernization Act. And basically, these QR codes allow an enormous amount of information to be stored in a way that you can't get on a traditional barcode. So barcode 1D has basically a code number on it, but a QR code can have information about the provenance of the good, that when it was packaged, what its use by date is. So when a retailer is scanning a product for sale, the machine can tell them whether or not it's expired. So they don't rely on one of the the shop assistants to kind of find those goods and take them out. So it's coming. It means some software upgrades for some companies, but hardware upgrades for older equipment.
A lot more sticky labels to be printed, I guess.
Exactly. Yes. Good for Avery Dennison.
Yeah, we do have an investment in a company that makes sticky labels. But people keep asking, what's so innovative about that? Well, this sort of innovations really impact his business in a very positive way. One of the areas we have been keen for a while is RFID, and that sort of solves similar problems. Product identification, easy to read with even more level of detail. How's that progressing? What's your perception from the end?
Yeah, there was a lot of kind of exposure to RFID in the show. I took a couple of photos of different things. RFID, we've talked about it before on Insights, typically for use in sort of retail applications, tracking individual garments through from the warehouse into the sort of retail format, and and then even into the payment solution. So just having to drop a load of goods into a box at Decathlon instead of having to put everything through the checkout. It's being used, RFID is being used increasingly in industrial applications as well. So you can see on the slide, the left-hand side, there's a sort of tunnel that goods can go down. The top of the tunnel has a device that's constantly scanning for RFID codes. And so the box that goes through could have a whole number of different objects in it. Each of them can be registered so that the warehouse and the warehouse operation and the software knows exactly where everything is. when it goes through, where it's going. And likewise, on the right-hand side of the slide, there's a even bigger, more industrial application for the automotive sector. So those two big yellow scanners you can see there, as vehicles go down the manufacturing line, these scanners can see which different elements or different parts of the machine have been put in, um, exactly which piece of equipment it is, serial numbers, and it's great for sort of tracking quality control all the way through the production line, as well as tracking things like tools and equipment that the people building them are using. So it's definitely, RFID is definitely taking off in lots of different environments.
Yeah, I mean, obviously nothing compares to large volume retail in terms of impacting the actual market volumes, but it's nice to see that unlocking more value. And the industrial Internet of Things in general, the kind of the connectivity pervading various industrial use cases. Any thoughts on how is that? We once were told that 5G networks will, unleash the world of ubiquitous connectivity, wirelessly connected cars everywhere, etc. Is that happening?
Yeah, it's definitely happening. But it's not only 5G. So again, it's a little bit of a horses for courses issues, depending on the size of the factory, depending or the logistics side, depending on the task that the IoT is doing. So some cases, a device may have very critical real-time information that it needs to either get out or receive, in which case you might want to be using something like ultra wideband, or if that's not the case, if maybe you need a high throughput of information but not with the same very critical timing, you might want to use Wi-Fi or even a private 5G network. Obviously, Bluetooth Low Energy is used in cases where there isn't a lot of, maybe they're battery operated rather than being connected to the sort of mains power. But lots of different options here, and I wouldn't say anyone is particularly standing out right now, but all of them are seeing a lot of growth because more and more Internet of Things. We're just seeing it coming everywhere across industry.
There's courses for horses, really, depending on the use case.
Yes, very much so.
Well, since we're almost out of time, but since the subject of the call is robotics, and we've heard from Elon Musk and Jensen Huang that of NVIDIA that this will be, I think Elon Musk said it's going to be a $10 trillion market, and there'll be a humanoid robot in every home. Any sign of humanoid robots, at least in every warehouse?
Not yet. Not yet, I would say. I mean, I agree. It does feel like they're coming, but they're definitely over the horizon. There were no humanoid robots at the show. And I think the point is, particularly in logistics and automation, there's still they're solving very specific problems. And so they don't need the kind of flexibility and, the ability of a humanoid robot that can do lots of different tasks. So these are still very low cost, very granular, very focused. And yeah, still some time yet, I think, before we see humanoid robots in this environment.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing what happens when they do arrive. But when they do, we're working hard on finding companies that make semiconductor components and sensors that make this machine stick. So hopefully we'll participate in that, and our investors will participate in that. Well, with that, I'll bring the conversation to the close. Well done surviving another day in the trade show in Birmingham, and look forward to more in the near future.
Great, thanks.